Waning influence, fractured relationships. The United States in Latin America today. Will a new U.S. president change the dynamic? We'll be hearing from Venezuela, Colombia, and Argentina. From the National Congress of Argentina in Buenos Aires, I'm Avi Lewis. This week, Inside USA goes outside for a South American perspective on the power in the North. In the 1990s, Argentina was known as the poster child for the Washington Consensus, corporate-friendly policies enforced by Washington-based bodies like the World Bank and IMF. Today, across most of Latin America, politicians pledging allegiance to the U.S. and its institutions would be committing political suicide. The shift away from the U.S. has been dramatic and costly for some. Just this month, the IMF itself announced that it was being forced to lay off almost 400 workers and sell some of its gold. Structural adjustment policies come home to roost. As the U.S. influence in the region has waned, America's last great ally is the right-wing government of Colombia, with whom the Bush administration has been trying to seal a free trade deal. It's a deal that's been blocked by Democrats in Congress. This week and next, we'll be looking at the shifting relationship between the U.S. and the rest of the Americas, and we start with this week's Inside Focus, to raise a bow on the Colombian free trade deal and how it's seen inside the country.
Colombia's relationship with the U.S. is cemented by billions of dollars of direct military aid. Money provided, according to Washington, to fight the so-called war on drugs. The production of cocaine hasn't stopped, but as a result of the cash, Colombia, America's main ally in the region, dominated by countries with often antagonistic relationships towards the U.S., finds itself being able to field a larger army than France or Israel. It now has the second most powerful military in the region, massively disproportionate to its size. Now the Bush administration wants to deepen its ties with Colombia, with a free trade agreement between both nations.
Thank you, President.
But Democrats in the United States, including Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, say that Colombia's problems with violence could get worse if such deal is passed. It has even become an election issue. They fear situations like this one. Another labor union leader assassinated. Gilardo Gómez Alzate was a teacher and was entering his home when a group of unknown men shot him. He's now one of the over 2,500 labor union leaders killed in Colombia in the last 20 years. Although the targeted killings against labor unions in Colombia has dropped off, it continues to be a dangerous job. And José Joaquín Vázquez is a perfect example of it. His office has bulletproof windows after it was attacked. And now he moves around the city of Medellín with security provided by the government.
In Colombia, there is a culture against labor unions. We have been vilified. The government says we are doing better because only 70 were killed in comparison to the previous year when 200 were killed. 75! Signing an FTA will make matters worse. It's like justifying all these killings.
José Joaquín told me he's convinced that Colombia is not ready for an FTA.
In Colombia, unemployment is one of the causes of the war because war employs a lot of people. Those who have no jobs will become a paramilitary, a guerrilla, or get involved in the drug business.
The fear is that making money will become an excuse for more violence and more war. In Apartado, northeast of Colombia, people have become aware of this a long time ago. This is an area where guerrillas and paramilitaries operate. We're now heading to see a community that has been forced out of their land by those seeking to extend palm tree plantations. The palm tree is used to produce biodiesel, and biodiesel is a key part of the free trade agreement between the United States and Colombia. Enrique Manuel Petro has been resisting death threats for over 6 years. Paramilitary groups operating have been trying to push him out of his land, and shows me the death threats written on the walls.
The palm business is spilled with the blood of our friends, our family members. We have seen so much death at the hands of the paramilitary groups. The rich have machines to work the land and need biodiesel so they can use their fancy cars, but doing this will make us, the small farmers, disappear.
Even though paramilitary groups were demobilized back in 2002, people here say that they continue to work in this area and that they're funded by the oil palm companies in order to secure the area.
There was an operation by the paramilitaries in our village. They said that we were members of the FARC. Our son was assassinated. We had to leave and we ended up here. Now I know it was because they wanted to extend the land to grow palm trees.
While the demobilizing of the paramilitaries has received much international coverage, less known is the scandal that has gripped the government since 2006, linking former senior members of President Álvaro Uribe's government directly to right-wing death squads in the past. Even the president himself is being investigated. Just last week, Uribe had to deny charges he helped plan a 1997 massacre by right-wing paramilitaries. His role is being examined in an official investigation. As in the United States, the FTA has become in Colombia a divisive issue. And while the government tries to sell it at home, many continue to fear the consequences it may have. Among them are Colombia's indigenous communities. We traveled to Pueblo Nuevo in the Cauca Valley to meet them and hear the reasons. Colombia's indigenous people have been able to win legal title to 28% of Colombia's national territory. Territory they govern with their own laws and their own security.
Our economy is of subsistence, but in the U.S., agriculture has been subsidized. Here we don't even have credits. It's like comparing an elephant with a small ant.
Nature is for these people a fundamental part of their living. And the big complaint among all of them is that the government has not explained them what will and what will not change. The Colombian government claims that misinformation is probably one of the main reasons why so many of the country's people continue to oppose the FTA. The foreign minister says many Colombian products already enter the United States duty-free under the 16-year-old Andean Trade Preference Act, and claims that the new pact would cement that arrangement.
We consider that the economy of the U.S. and ours is not competitive, but rather complementary. The treaty has taken into consideration the asymmetries that exist in the Colombian and American economies, so we can protect local producers.
But those who continue to oppose the FTA feel that they have been forgotten and say that once the deal is signed, the situation will only get worse.
We're back, coming to you this week from Buenos Aires, where it's time now to zoom out to the big picture of how U.S. influence is changing across the Americas. For a longer view on the past, present, and future of that dynamic, we brought together two Argentinians with very different points of view, sat them down in a storied plaza, and let the talking begin. Juan Tocatlian is a professor of international relations at San Andres University here in Argentina. And Diego Geller was Argentina's ambassador to the U.S. during the 1990s. He's now an advisor to the current Buenos Aires mayor, right-wing Mauricio Macri. There's been a lot of talk from the United States about Venezuela as public enemy #1 for the U.S. and Latin America. And yet, with the billions of dollars going to Colombia, going into historic growth in the armed forces there, in militarization in Colombia, which Colombia has used in cross-border raids into Ecuador, etc. My question for you, Diego, is Colombia the most destabilizing force in Latin America?
No, I don't think so. I think that in some aspects, all the aid has been very useful for Colombia, and personally I think that the Colombian state and the Colombian government is defeating the FARC organization. That means that things are improving.
When you started speaking praise about the Colombian regime, I started sensing that one was getting a little nervous.
Well, the question is the following, as far as I can see it. The United States had made Colombia its major ally in the area. Colombia is now the 5th recipient of US aid in the world. Colombia has the 2nd largest embassy outside Iraq. Colombia has, on a regular basis, the presence of 800 military personnel from the United States and 600 security personnel from private corporations dedicated to security. And it's fighting a very dramatic, critical internal war. And in that sense, Colombia has the right to choose its ally. And it has made its decision go with the United States.
Well, an ally offering $4 billion in military aid is I mean,
that's right. But what has been quite different and what is quite challenging for all the region is what happened with the raid to kill Mr. Reyes, a FARC leader. And I think that has created a climax in Latin America. That's something that we have witnessed in the Middle East, in Central Asia. That is preventive strikes, preventive use of force, unlawful considerations in terms of the usage of force. It's now in the region, and that's a major problem.
Diego, what he's describing as the Bush Doctrine comes to Latin America because Colombia now asserts the right to attack terrorists wherever they are camped.
Both Venezuela and Colombia and Ecuador have certain ties, undefined but real ties, with the FARC guerrilla group. Then we have to solve that. That means we have to achieve, and that the good part of the Brazilian proposal nowadays, to build a council for the regional defense or security, where we can stabilize the region, establish the rules of the game, where all the countries in the region has to achieve the compromises, the engagement in terms of cooperation within the region to avoid this type of episode.
Like an Organization of American States without the United States. Again, all of the solutions that you're proposing as positive ways forward are remarkable for their absence of U.S. involvement or domination.
I firmly believe in the integration of the Americas, but for that we have to achieve the primary goal, that is our own development.
Let's start with free trade, which was the symbol of U.S. involvement in Latin America for much of the 90s. At the moment, the free trade agenda, as defined by the U.S., is at a standstill in Latin America. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Juan?
The next U.S. administration had to rethink its dialogue with Latin America instead of placing just trade at the forefront. We have so many other questions: political instability, energy considerations, the poverty agenda, the gap between Latin America and the United States in terms of perceptions, in terms of credibility. I think that it's a good time for politics. Let's keep trade there.
You think it's a good thing?
Well, things are like they are.
No, but listen, when you were ambassador to the United States under Carlos Menem, your president described the kind of relationship that he wanted to have with the United States as carnal relations. Well, so maybe that was a little too one-way, that relationship.
Well, but that was too close. It's very hard to sleep with the elephant. And when you are 80%, and all South America together is less than 20%, always is an asymmetrical relation. It's hard to reach an agreement in those terms.
All right, hold that thought. We got to take a break, but we'll be back in just a minute. Coming up, more from our conversation with Juan Tocatlian and Diego Geller. And then we go inside America's testiest relationship on the continent with Venezuela under Hugo Chavez.